When I go to a movie theater, I go to watch a movie. I'm not going to suck cock at a movie theater. I'll suck cock at home. I'll suck cock on the bus, but I'm not going to suck cock at the movie theater because I would never disrespect Nicole Kidman like that. Greetings, angels. I'm Dead Girl. And today we are getting into the spooky side of old Hollywood history. Today we are going to answer the question on everyone's mind. Did Vampira kill James Dean with black magic?
Really, really nasty thing, so. What I need is a Vampira cocktail to settle my nerves. It'll not only settle them, it will petrify them. A Vampira cocktail. You like it? It hates you. I've had several letters asking whether olives or cherries should be used in making my cocktail. Well, actually, neither is necessary, since they'd only disintegrate upon being put into the cocktail. However, if you want to use some garnish, you can drop in an eyeball, if you happen to have an extra one around the house.
That's right. Today we are going to be talking about my favorite goth baddie, the archetype for Elvira, and a forgotten horror icon and legend, Vampira. People often put Vampira, Morticia Addams, Lily Munster, and Elvira all into the same category of spooky hot vixen. You often see them in pictures together where being like, which one is you? Or which one's the hottest? But for me, Vampira has always been my personal favorite, and I think she is the most slept on out of all of them. Except for maybe Lily Munster. I don't think anyone is choosing Lily Munster, which is a shame because she is a baddie as well. But Vampira has always been just super special inspiration for me, for my style, even a little bit of my personality. There was really no one like her. She was fully committed to her spooky persona, to the point that it became her reality. I've got a quote from an interview with her and the Los Angeles Tribune that really sums up just exactly why I love her so much. "There isn't much to tell," she said. "I was born in Lapland. I have an owl for a pet. I have a 19-inch waist, a 38-inch bust, and a 36-inch hip. There isn't much to tell," she said. "I was born in Lapland. I have an owl for a house pet. I have a 19-inch waist, 38-inch bust, and 36-inch hips. My earliest childhood recollection is that I always wanted to play with mice. I'm very antisocial. I simply detest people. I don't like snakes. Snakes eat spiders, and I am very fond of spiders." On being asked about how she felt about children, she didn't miss a beat. "Oh yes, delicious." I mean, what's not to love about her character? Like, she's insane. And I don't think this was like a popular thing in the 50s to be so edgy and dark with your comedy. Another reason that I am such a big Vampira fan is because I love her relationship with the band The Misfits. And this is a band that I do have mixed feelings about. I love their music, but let's be honest, Danzig and Michael Graves are both kind of jackasses. But when they wrote their song Vampira and got to meet her and include her in a music video, it gave her a lot of much needed publicity since she was basically forgotten at that point in history. And I've got to appreciate them for that. Also, this is the era when she had just like the coolest punk haircut with her little like mohawk. That's a bold look for a woman of that age, and I wish more people would do it. Vampira really gained her fame from The Vampira Show, which was a television program in 1954 where she would host late night horror movies, usually kind of more cheesy B movies, creature features that you can kind of make fun of along with her. She would not only introduce the films, but she would make commentary during the interludes between commercials. If this sounds familiar, yes, this is basically how Elvira started her television career as well. Basically, it's the same thing. No shade to Elvira, that's just the truth. We love Elvira, so it's cool. All the while during the episode, she was staying in her spooky drag character. She was hot, she was scary, she was everything the world and especially Hollywood needed. Each episode began with Vampira slinking down a dark hallway flooded with dry ice fog. And then, at the end of her trance-like walk, the camera zooms in on her and she gives a piercing scream. Unfortunately, the Vampira Show only lasted a year and was mainly broadcasted in only Los Angeles and the surrounding areas. So there are almost no full recordings of any of the episodes. It's basically lost media at this point. And while the TV studio didn't archive any of the full episodes, there have been people that have put together montages of clips that include her iconic intro scene. And you can find these on YouTube, and I will add one in the description of this video. Even after the show ended, Vampira continued to be a celebrity. She was featured on many game shows and talk shows. She had a documentary made about her, and she was featured in the Best Worst movie, Planet 9 from Outer Space, from famed B-movie director Ed Wood. It has also been confirmed that Disney's Maleficent, the villain character from Sleeping Beauty, was modeled after Vampira, which I did not know. I feel like there's been a lot of celebrities that have said that they were the models for Maleficent. I think I always thought it was Joan Crawford, but it's very cool to see that it was Vampira. All right, before we get into the main subject of this video, it is important to understand the background, personal history, and life of Vampira. Maria Elizabeth Sereniemi was born on December 11th in 1922 in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Melia was born to Finnish parents, her father an immigrant and her mother just of Finnish origin. I think she was like second generation at that point. Despite her birth certificate saying that she was born in Massachusetts, Melia would claim that she was actually born in Finland. Melia would work odd jobs such as gutting fish and working in the local circuses of Ohio. In the year 1940, she began to move between Los Angeles and New York in order to pursue her acting career. She had an uncredited role as Woman at the Bar in 1947's If Winter Comes. There's also this claim that she was part of a Broadway production starring Mae West, but was removed from the production because Mae West said that she was threatened by her, which I think is crazy. And I don't think it's true because I couldn't find anything backing this up. But it does make for a fun, classic Hollywood drama story that Ryan Murphy would definitely exploit. During her early years in Los Angeles, she met Orson Welles and began having an affair with him. She would become pregnant with his child, but would put the child up for adoption, since he was in a relationship with Rita Hayworth at the time and would end up marrying her soon after. It's really crazy how messy old Hollywood was when it comes to people having an affair and then just it always ending up with unwanted pregnancies. This happened with James Stewart. This happened with Gary Cooper. Seriously, these boys needed to wrap them things up. Orson Welles, however, was far from the only famous man that Vampira was known to have a relationship with. As she rose to fame, she began to have a relationship with Anthony Perkins of Psycho fame, and even Marlon Brando, who would pay for her telephone bill just so that he could call her up anytime he wanted to have a fling. This is essentially the 1950s equivalent of someone buying Megan Thee Stallion a phone just so that they can see pictures of her WAP. I'm not saying Vampira is the Megan Thee Stallion of the 1950s, but I am saying that I really need a photo shoot with Megan Thee Stallion dressed up as Vampira with full makeup. Come on. That would be amazing. Mela also met Elvis in Las Vegas, and he was said that he gave her a private guitar lesson. And I think we know darn tootin' well that she wasn't learning no damn guitar. In fact, he was probably the one learning a few lessons that night. Other romantic encounters include Stanley Kubrick and Robert Mitchum. I had no idea she had an affair with Stanley Kubrick, and I'm obsessed with the idea. I wish he would have put her in some of his movies. Like, can you imagine if they recast The Shining with Vampira as Wendy? That's a whole different movie, and I would love to see it. And it probably would have saved Shirley's mental health. So it would be a win-win for everybody. But her most famous and darkest relationship was with Hollywood heartthrob James Dean. Dean and Vampira met in 1954, where they would spend late nights in a cafe talking with each other about their similar morbid interests. These topics ranged from the occult to UFOs, and the pair became really bonded by their compatible obsession with darkness. I would spend a fortune if I could see a true crime podcast with Vampira and James Dean. It would just be so good. It's like the most random old Hollywood pair you could think of. It is unsure exactly what Dean and Vampira's relationship really consisted of. Most people thought that it was sexual. Personally, I don't think that it was, even though it makes for a spicier story. I think that Melia was enamored by James Dean, and he was so famous at the time, and he's just so famous for being handsome. It's hard not to fall in love with him. And I think she liked the idea of using his rising fame to help her potential film career. As for Dean, he was obsessed with death and witchcraft and felt really cool being friends with Vampira. I'm sure that most of the people he was surrounded by were typical Hollywood glamorous celebrities, and he wanted something a little bit more deep and edgy, and he found that with Vampira. As their relationship grew, Vampira would teach James Dean things about the occult and other genres of witchcraft. His ultimate goal was being able to talk to the dead. And when Vampira asked why he was so obsessed with death, he responded, earnestly that it was the only way he would ever know peace. However, it became quite clear that James Dean was much more serious about his morbid interests than Vampira was. For her, it was a character choice. It was part of her career. And while she was interested in it, it was a character. Their friendship sadly began to deteriorate as Dean began to think of Vampira as, well, a poser.
The answer to what is a poser is you.
He resented her for tricking him into thinking that he had opened a door to something more real than it was. When talking to famed Hollywood gossip columnist and actual demon Hadda Hooper, he said about Vampira, "I found her void of any true interest except her vampira makeup. And I don't want to go out with witches. I dig dating cartoons even less. I have never taken Vampira out, and I would so much like to clear this up. I have a fairly adequate knowledge of satanic forces, and I was interested to find out if this girl was actually obsessed with such force. She was a subject that I was very interested in learning about. I met her and I engaged her in conversation. She knew absolutely nothing. She uses her inane characterization as an excuse for the most infantile expression you can imagine."
Jesus Christ.
Now, Vampira was obviously very hurt by this betrayal. She made her own public statement referring to James Dean as a pretentious ass and, quote, "I'll challenge him to an intelligence contest anytime." This was coincidentally the same time that Marilyn Monroe had made a public statement about James Dean being super pretentious. So it didn't really look good for Dean. As the feud became public, there were claims that Vampira was using a shrine that contained pictures of James Dean with his eyes scratched out, and that she was using this shrine to use black magic to hex him. But eventually, she wanted to regain her relationship with James Dean, trying to send him a picture of her sitting in front of a grave with "having a wonderful time. I wish you were here," written on the back of the photograph. Since she didn't have his address to mail it to him, she just ended up going to a restaurant that she knew he frequented and just put it up on the wall. We love a resourceful queen. Rumors spread around Hollywood that the photograph actually had the phrase, "Darling, come and join me," written on the back of the photograph as some sort of sinister threat. Dean eventually called Vampira on the telephone to ask what this photograph was about and what the hell it meant. And her response was that it was all just meant as a joke and that she missed him. The very next day after this phone call, James Dean and his mechanic took his car, Little Bastard, a racing Porsche, out for a drive. Little Bastard was a racing automobile that Dean was going to be using in an upcoming race that he wanted to prepare for. One of the things that's most famous about James Dean is that he was obsessed with racing and had a little bit of a adrenaline junkie lifestyle. Tragically, this car ride would end in a crash. The car was totaled, and both passengers had life-threatening injuries. And while James Dean's mechanic would survive, James Dean would pass away in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. This gave to endless rumors about the car being cursed and that James Dean had met his end because of his satanic practices. A piece of the car, what piece of the car I couldn't tell you because I don't know anything about mechanics, but one piece of the car is now held at the Zach Baggins Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, which is actually where I got the idea to do this video when I visited in October. On the tour, they talk about Vampira hexing him and that how she was just a total witch and everyone knows she's the reason he died. Basically, everything on the tour was sensationalized, which I can appreciate. It makes for a really good story, but it's definitely not the truth. After Dean's death, Vampira's reputation was absolutely tarnished. She was known as James Dean's satanic Black Madonna and was thought to be his last sexual partner before he died. And with this, Hollywood was absolutely going to hold it against her. But to be fair, Vampira was not the most sensitive about the issue, to the point that she was really leaning into the notoriety. She was at a party and they released a picture of her next to a roughed up mannequin covered in bandages and dressed like James Dean. Patty, yes. Not cute though. Pretty disrespectful. It was also like within a couple years after he died. Like, I don't know. That woman needed a publicist. That's just not okay. Now I want to get into what my take is on this story. Overall, I think this is a very sensationalized story, and it is completely silly to think that Vampira had demonic powers. Considering that the whole reason James Dean stopped being friends with her was because he was disappointed in the lack of authenticity in her magical powers. Like, he stopped being friends with her because she wasn't a witch. So even if witchcraft is real, Vampira didn't have those powers. But I really do love this story. I find the friendship between Vampira and James Dean to be really, really interesting and kind of wholesome. It's a total odd pairing of two random Hollywood celebrities that people wouldn't think would end up being besties. I also think that it shows another perspective of James Dean's personality, and it really humanizes him. James Dean wasn't just this ultra handsome, mega famous celebrity that met a tragic end. He was a real person and he was a weirdo. He was highly interested in philosophy and dark subjects, and he wanted to be surrounded by those people who also had those interests. He didn't want to just be this like brainless celebrity that everyone probably thought he was. So I think it's nice to honor his memory by remembering that he was a weirdo. He was one of us. He was. Just way hotter and way richer. All right, that is all for today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a really good time filming it and doing the research. Even though I had to film it twice, it was worth it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and commenting, as well as subscribing to my channel. I do videos every other Thursday on completely random topics, so there's a little bit for everyone. I also have a Patreon if you are feeling extra generous. Anyone who subscribes to that will have their name in the credits for each video, as well as receiving exclusive content and videos released early. And with that, I'm Dead Girl. Goodbye, good night, and good luck. Ah! 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 That's my vampire scream, everybody. That's my vampire scream. All right.